us to remove obstacles and do apologetics with people. How are we going to use those 3 parts? Why does in your heart set apart Christ as Lord come first?
Well, without that, we wouldn't be defending the truth.
Okay, yeah, so without having Christ as Lord, we wouldn't be defending the truth. But also, what is having Christ as Lord? Well, not necessarily. That doesn't necessarily entail that, but it's a part of it, right? Because you could be defending the truth even if you don't like Jesus, right? So if you're a demon, you know the truth and you know He exists. You're not going to deny His existence, but you still might accept the truth. I just don't want a relationship with that guy. He's terrible. I hate him, right? But no, right? So what does having Christ as Lord entail for us, and even our response and how we interact with truth and with people? What's our goal going to be?
To bring people to Him. To
bring people to Him. In other words, even if our mindset in a present moment isn't necessarily to bring someone to Him, which is a great thing to do, it's going to be to love people, right? So in your hearts. So yeah, bringing people to Jesus is like the best way you can love someone. And so if you're loving God, then you're going to be loving others. If Christ is Lord and you're loving Him as Lord, then you're going to love others. And so then we can actually go from that point into the actual apologetics, which is always be prepared to give a defense. Now we can actually safely enter into argumentation for the defense of the gospel, right? And at that point, we're going to go into it in a way that's not going to lose the person, God willing, but the main objective is going to be to win the person, not necessarily to win the argument. Sometimes you're going to have to use discernment to know when to back off or to press forward, right? And so this is what you're going to have to do. So always be prepared to give a defense. Comes after setting your heart Christ as Lord. And this is important because if you get it turned around and you do it the other way, you might be a spiritual arsonist. You burn down people's ideas and you lose the person in the process. So the last part then is going to follow, which is do this with
gentleness and respect.
All right. So you have Christ as Lord. Be prepared to give a defense for the hope that you have, and then do this with gentleness and respect. So this is just going to come naturally. You guys, if you ever find yourself without gentleness and respect and you're defending Jesus, right? First and foremost, Jesus does not need your defense. Just remember that. He can defend himself pretty well. He's God of the universe, okay? Secondly, gentleness and respect leaves you. Now you're going against Scripture. Be careful. All right? So, is there a time in which you can be a little straightforward and a little harsh with people? Yeah, of course. I think that there are times, but generally speaking, we want to operate, as the Scripture talks about here, in gentleness and respect. Some of those times you might be thinking, what would those times be? Is say you're on a debate, with somebody else. So say you're on a stage and you're debating someone else. That's not the time to be nice to someone, because now he's probably not going to change his views. You're probably not going to change your views, but the people in the audience might change their views. So what you need to do, you need to handle it tactfully, but that's not the time to be super nice with the person that you're talking to. You be nice to the person, but you can take down his arguments, right? And that's different. And that's going to be a different scenario, because you're dealing with more than just the person that you're interacting with. You're dealing with the whole audience now. All right, so those are going to be different things. Remember our theme verse, okay? In your heart, set apart Christ as Lord. Always be prepared to give a defense for the hope that you have, and do this with gentleness and respect. If you remember those 3 points, you'll be good at apologetics when it comes to how you're doing them. Now, what you're saying is just as important, right? So how you say it is important. Now, what you say, you actually got to study. And that's what we've been doing the past few weeks. What argument did we start out for first? Can you guys remember? Just so we can... Cosmological argument. All right, so this is an argument basically from cause to effect, that you cannot have an infinite series of causes and effects that lead back in the past forever and ever. It becomes a logical contradiction. The question you have to ask, just think of it this way, if you have an endless stream of dominoes, you have to ask, who moved the first domino, right? If there's causes and effects, there has to be a prime mover, or else all the dominoes should be standing straight up. With motion comes a mover, right? So that's the unmoved mover argument. So you're going to get the uncaused cause, or the necessary and contingency arguments, right? So there's necessary beings and there's a contingent being. There's at least one necessary. All of us, we know, are contingent. You guys remember that argument?
Yes.
All right, so that's in your arsenal. Remember it. What was William Lane Craig's version of that argument? Do you guys remember? Everything that begins to exist has a cause. The universe began to exist, therefore the universe has a cause. All right, very simple to remember. If you ever get caught up and you're like, infinite regress, I just can't explain it, go through those premises. Everything that begins to exist has a cause. The universe began to exist, The universe has a cause. Very simple. And if you defend those two premises, right? Everything that begins to exist has a cause. Go to cosmology. We talked about the universe, the Big Bang, arguing on their terms and things of that nature. Everyone believes that the universe began to exist. Okay? So you can defend that premise, right? Very easily. Then you get to the next premise. Everything that begins to exist has a cause. Next premise, the universe began to exist. Easy premise to defend. Then therefore the conclusion must be true because the first two premises are true. So you defend those two premises, it entails the conclusion. Cosmological argument. Then after the cosmological, we went into what was known as the teleological. You can tell she's dating me. Okay. All right, teleological argument. All right.
She's flirting with you right now.
This is it. Hey, baby. All right, teleological argument. This is the argument from design, and we went over 2 weeks in this argument. There's a lot to cover. The first week we talked about the fine-tuning of the universe. Yeah, and so we talked about cosmic constants, such as the cosmological constant, the strong nuclear force, weak nuclear force, and we went down the list and we showed you the odds of these things happening, or we showed you the odds of these things if they were just off by a hair's breadth, the universe would not be able to be life permitting. Okay, this is the first part. Then we went into the details of the design or the intricacies of biological life itself, and we went over that last week. And so when you stack just the first causes of the universe and the very fact that it looks like it has been finely tuned to allow for life, but even in this finely tuned system that allows for life, you then see the improbability of life even happening in that, and yet we have an Earth where life does happen, even on we know that it just further adds on to the fact that this cannot be something that was done purely by chance. The weight is too far against it. So we've gone over cosmological, teleological, and today we're gonna meet an objection, and this is going to be an objection that you're going to hear. It's going to be the main objection of an atheist or someone who doesn't believe in God. It's going to be the problem of evil. Now, so we're going to take this argument from today. We're going to take it as said from an atheist. So we're going to say the atheist is arguing God can't exist because evil. Okay, so that's what we're going to be. So that means the burden of proof is going to be on the atheist's shoulders today. So the other times we've been trying to make a claim that God does exist because of this evidence. So we're bearing the burden of proof, right? So now it's on the atheist's shoulders. He's saying God doesn't exist because blank, right? And so this is something that we're going to be tackling today, is their objection to the existence of God and the position that they take, or why they take the position they take, or some of them at least. Now, with that being said, and even though that's the route we're going, question for you guys. Do only atheists struggle with the problem of evil? Only atheists? No. Of course not. This is a problem that is not exclusive to atheism, right? Everyone has to deal with this problem. Okay? So, why do you think everyone has to deal with this problem? Get some feedback from you guys.
We all have free will and we can do whatever we want.
Okay. Yeah, we all have free will. We do whatever we want. I've got a question, guys. Where is evil? Where is it?
Where there's no God. Where God isn't.
Oh, okay. Well, let's think a little. Just think a little more literally right now.
Okay.
Where is evil? In the world, everywhere. It's like if you go to China, is there evil there?
Yes.
Yeah, this is something that is going to be universal. It's not like that there's some corner of this globe where evil hasn't touched.
Yeah.
Like it's everywhere, and so therefore everyone needs to deal with this problem. And so across the world, whether you have religions that have touched Christianity or not, people are asking this question of why evil and things of that nature. And it's literally all around us. Do you guys remember back in 2004 when there was that huge tsunami?
Yeah.
Okay, so something crazy happened. A lot of people suffered and died because of that tsunami. That suffering wasn't good. It was evil. And you'll see that this is what's known as a natural evil, right? It's not caused by man, but it just happened. And a lot of people died and suffered because of it. The magnitude was a 9 megathrust, right? It's huge. 13 countries were damaged. 226,000 people were killed, including 166,000 in Indonesia, 38,000 in Sri Lanka, 16,000 in India, 5,300 in Thailand, and 5,000 foreign tourists. A lot of people. Injured, over 500,000 people were injured. There's a lot of pain and suffering from this event. It was not good. Okay? Additional deaths from the infections and diseases was 150,000. There's a lot of pain and a lot of suffering in this world, and pain and suffering are not ideal states. They're not good. Okay? They are not good. The stats go on and on, apparently. So the problem is this. Every religion of the world, they have to deal with this issue. Everyone. Why? Because it's everywhere. Okay? So let's look at some quotes real quick. My handy dandy notebook. Okay. Alright, so Hinduism. An old lady from Tamil Nadu in South India. God, why have you done this? What did we do to upset you? Okay. Alright, Pandit. If I butcher some of these words, it's okay. Okay. This Hindu priest in New Delhi said the disaster was caused by a great amount of repressed evil that man has done on the earth and was caused by the position of the planets. So you see what they're doing is they're giving answers to the problem of evil, or what's going on here, at least to this problem. And we're going to be talking about natural. This is a natural evil problem. We'll be talking about a logical evil problem as well that we'll be addressing as well. And to the same thing. Okay, so Hassan Bazian, professor of Islam at UC Berkeley, quoted that the hadith said that in Islam, all those who die in a catastrophe die as martyrs. Their sins are not taken into account, and they are allowed into paradise. All right, so another answer. A Jewish rabbi said, this is an expression of the great wrath of God towards this world. The world is punished, for its sin. And according to New Age theology and the Gaia hypothesis, Gaia, okay, tomatoes. All right, the tsunami was the result of the earth, which is a living organism. Until man finds peace and harmony and stops attempting to destroy her, she will continue to man through her extraordinary powers. Okay. And according to some deists, God couldn't avoid the tsunami. He can only respond to the tragedy. Right? And so, well, before we get to that. So evil is all around us, and we're going to be hitting on some arguments tonight that will hopefully give you guys a few bullets in your arsenal to be able to respond to people who raise the objection of evil and suffering in the world. And I think what your temptation is going to be is to look at the problem of evil and suffering alone, but I don't want you to do that. We have plenty of evidence based off of the other arguments that we have stated that are going to help give weight to the idea that God really is there. Now I'm going to be, in a few seconds, I'm going to show a video, and after the video I'm going to be going over some definitional things, such as what evil is, what an inconsistent set is, things of that nature that are going to help you understand the logical problem of evil. And you're going to see that by the end of this talk that we're having tonight, that the logical problem of evil really isn't one that's debated anymore. Okay? Why? Because by the end of it I'll show you why most philosophers, even atheists, think that the burden of proof for the atheist is just too heavy to bear. It's too heavy for an atheist to say evil exists, therefore God doesn't exist. So most atheists, or smart ones, won't even argue it. You know, they'll move into probabilities over saying evil, therefore not God, which is a very strong claim. A general rule in argumentation, just so you guys know, okay, modest claims are much easier to defend and harder to refute than huge, extravagant claims. So if I were to say God does not exist because evil is in the world, that is much harder to defend. The burden of proof is much heavier than if I were to say God probably does not exist. You guys get what I'm saying? And I can say, well, God could exist because of evil, but he probably doesn't because of the amount of suffering. Now we're getting into a tougher issue. Do you guys see the difference? And so when this is the avenue the atheists have taken. I would actually encourage you as a Christian who's doing apologetics to do something similar. In your argumentation with people, not like arguing like you will with your wife one day or your mom or dad, but like in your talking with people about different arguments, make modest claims. Okay? Make modest claims because they are going to be stronger than the gung-ho, God does not exist claims, right? And so that's going to be much easier to refute. So, yeah, just think about that. Let's watch this video, okay? Let's see if I can do it. And there's no sound. Hold on. Why is there? Hey Dan.
Is the TV?
It might be.
TV
Hold on.
muted?
Technical difficulties. It's probably me. I'm going to send it this way. Oh, I have it on. Hold on. My fault, guys. That was me.
Good game.
So what would you say to the person tonight who wrote, you know, I can't believe in God who allows so much evil and suffering to happen in this world?
Well, I think that we need to distinguish between what's called the intellectual problem of suffering and the emotional problem of suffering. The intellectual problem of suffering concerns how to reconcile the existence of suffering with an almighty and all-loving God. This problem lies in the province of the philosopher. The emotional problem of evil concerns how to dissolve people's dislike or repugnance with a God who would allow terrible suffering in the world. This problem is an emotional problem which lies not in the province of the philosopher, but of the counselor or the pastor. And I'm convinced that by far and away, most people who object to the existence of God on the basis of the suffering in the world do so on emotional grounds, not on intellectual grounds. And if that was the full question that you just read to me, this person's probably like that. You notice there was no articulation of an argument there. There were no premises, there was no reasoning. It was just, I reject this sort of a God. And that, I think, is primarily an emotional problem. So, as a philosopher, what I deal with primarily is intellectual problem. And I think you can show that there is no good reason to think that the suffering in the world is either logically incompatible with God's existence or improbable with respect to God's existence. In fact, I think there's a good argument from evil to the existence of God, and it would go something like this. Premise one, if God does not exist, then objective moral values and duties do not exist. 2, evil exists. 3, therefore objective moral values and duties exist. Some things are really evil, therefore God exists. So while on a superficial level, evil seems to call into question God's existence, on a deeper level, evil actually proves God's existence. Because in the absence of God, good and evil as such would not exist. Now, with respect to the emotional problem of evil, I think that the solution to the emotional problem of evil is to be found in the suffering of Christ. If anyone could complain of innocent suffering, it would be Jesus Christ. Because even though he was sinless, he bore the penalty for the sin of the whole world. None of us can comprehend the depth of the suffering that he undertook. And why? Because he loves us so much. And when we contemplate the extent to which he was willing to go out of his love for us, I think that can give us the emotional strength to bear the cross that he asks us to bear in this life until we go to be with him and have our reward finally in heaven. And so when one is feeling the emotional burden of evil and suffering, I would suggest contemplating the cross of Christ, his love and his wounds and his sacrifice for you, and that can help you then to bear the suffering that he calls on you to
bear. Okay, so cut off a little early. So I want you guys to notice something that he brought up. He brought up 2 veins. And you're going to have to talk to people and find out where they're coming from in order to find out which vein of thought they're going down. Some people are going to say that I just couldn't believe in a God who would send blank to hell or whatever, things of that nature. Or I just couldn't believe in a God that would allow this much suffering. Or well, that's not an argument. That's an emotional response that leads to a rejection. And so this person is not making a logical argument, they're making a visceral response. And this is going to be a different type of person. This person does not need arguments per se. They probably need a counselor, right, at that point, or they need to be pointed to Jesus and what he did for us and things of that nature. So that's the first thing you want to notice. So the first thing you want to see when you're dealing with the argument of God or against God because of evil, is this person arguing emotionally, or is he arguing sincerely on the basis of the premises, okay? That I believe that since there's evil and God is supposed to be all-loving and all-powerful and there's evil in the world, he doesn't exist, and I think those are good reasons, okay? Now, if he's dealing with that, then that's not an emotional argument. Now we're actually dealing with an actual philosophical argument, and we can transition into understanding that this person is not making an emotional plea or an emotional visceral response of rejection, but we can kind of move over. So think of it like two veins right here. So, here's vein 1, vein 2, emotional, stop there. This person doesn't need an argument. This person needs probably an arm around his shoulder and the love of Christ. You guys see the difference?
Yes.
That's where you stop. Now this person's genuinely at school, really thinking through these things. It's really baffling him. Okay, now we have two veins that we can go down. The first one we're going to go down is the logical problem of evil. The second one is going to be the probability argument. Of evil. So we're going to deal with logic first, and then probabilities. We're going to deal with the deductive first, and then go more into inductive. Okay, and it's not going to be perfectly deductive in their arguing. You'll actually see that, and then I'll explain what I mean. I don't even know if they're trying to be deductive here, but let's go over the ancient argument of God against God because of evil. So remember how we talked about like Plato and stuff, and how he had these. Plato and Aristotle had these ancient arguments that we went over. Well, likewise, atheists have ancient philosophers as well. Epicurus, he was a hedonist. You guys know what hedonism is? You guys know hedonism bot from Futurama? Okay, but look, hedonism is you don't know. Okay, but hedonism is when you live for your pleasures. That goodness is based off of pleasure or not pleasure. Okay, so what makes something good? So the higher amount of pleasure it gives you, the more good it is, and so on and so forth. So he's the guy who coined the phrase "eat, drink, and be merry," right? So for tomorrow we die, or something like that, right? So the idea is there is no God, there's no meaning to this life, so just enjoy it. Okay. All right. So but he had this argument. Let's look at it. Maybe how many of you guys saw Batman versus Superman? The Batman versus Superman. No, the movie with Ben Affleck and
The live action movie, the one that sucks.
yeah, the one that wasn't that good, the one Zack Snyder made. Okay, all right, but you saw Lex Luthor say the same argument, but I don't think he gave credit to Epicurus, which is kind of dishonest on his part. But he is Lex Luthor, so it doesn't make a difference there because he lies a lot. But here, look, this is the argument: is God willing to prevent evil? Is God willing to prevent evil? Then he is not omnipotent, right? And so this is going to be the argument from Epicurus. Is God willing to prevent evil, but not able? Then he's not omnipotent. So there should be a but not able, but there's not. Okay. Is God willing to prevent evil, but not able? Then he's omnipotent. Or then he's not omnipotent. Is he able, but not willing? Then he is malevolent, which means the opposite of benevolent. Benevolent means good, wholly good. Or omnibenevolent is wholly good. Malevolent is evil. Okay. So then he is malevolent, okay? Is he both able and willing? Then whence cometh evil? Why is there evil? Okay? Is he neither able nor willing? Then why call him God? All right, when you read it, here's the thing. Makes sense, doesn't it? Like, do you guys understand the reasoning behind it? But there's some erroneous or invalid claims that are being made here. In fact, let's kind of break it down to something I like to call OOO-COW, okay? All right, so this is OOO is a good way to remember this. This is the set that's being given to you, and it's a logical set. It's saying that these things can't be true: omnipotent, omniscient, omnibenevolent, creator of the world. That's cow, okay? And evil exists. All those things seem to have a contradiction in them, right? To have a creator of the world, evil existing, even though he's omnipotent, omnibenevolent, and omniscient. Those are big words that mean simple things, and that's usually how philosophy works. Do you guys understand? Do you guys know the omnis?
Yeah.
All right. So omni, yeah. So all potent, omnipotent, all powerful. Okay. He's not impotent in any way. He's powerful in every way. Okay. Omniscient is going to be all-knowing. There you go, yeah. And then omnibenevolent, we already went over that one, that's all good. And so these are a good way to remember the set that you're gonna come across when it comes to the problem of evil, the logical problem of evil, is fun. It's a fun mnemonic device. O-O-O-cow, okay? Just remember that. Now, I want you guys to understand this. I put this up top. It's presented as an inconsistent set in logic. Meaning, if these things are true, then, or if this is true and this is true, then the whole thing is inconsistent. So if God is omnipotent, omniscient, omnibenevolent, and creator of the world, then evil should not exist. Because if he's omnipotent, then he wouldn't allow for evil if he's good as well, right? And so he'd be able to stamp out evil and things of that nature. If he's omniscient, he'd know it all. And if he wasn't able to do it, and he wasn't able to stamp out all the evil that he knew about, then he wouldn't be omnipotent, and so he wouldn't be God. And so these are arguments against God's existence. But the problem with an inconsistent set that's presented here is that there's no explicit contradiction. So say implicit, say explicit. So if you have a pen and paper, I need you to write these two things down. Implicit and explicit. Okay? Do you guys... So these are what we're going to be looking for. This is important. I know it's simple for some things, but for the sake of argument, this is what you need to think about. An explicit contradiction is something that is going to be on its face false, right? So analytically, it's going to be false. So if I say I'm a bachelor, but I'm married, then I have made an explicit contradiction. Why?
You can't be both.
You can't be both a bachelor and married. There's an explicit contradiction. So it's if I say I'm 6 feet tall and I'm also 4 feet tall, then what's that?
You're 5 feet.
So that would be a problem. That would be an explicit contradiction. But an implicit contradiction is going to be something that doesn't necessarily explicitly come from the set that's given. So married bachelor, that would be an explicit contradiction. So in that sense, that set, I am married, I am a bachelor, that would be an explicit contradiction in those sets. That would be an inconsistent set that's explicitly contradictory. But there are also sets where you have to imply the contradiction. And even though this set makes sense on its face, there's actually a few premises that are not included here that kind of weasel into the fact that therefore God does not exist. So that means you have to imply between the lines that these things can't be true and God exists. That's the implication, right? You have to imply it, and we'll sort of go over what that means. That means if I add a premise in here, I should be able to refute it pretty easily. So the logical problem of evil is pretty easy to refute. It is not much refuted much longer. But before we go into why it's why the implicit contradiction doesn't hold up, we're going to talk about what evil is, because you can't argue against or for something if we don't have a set definition as to what it is. So what is evil? I want to get your guys' take on this, and I want you guys to think just for a few minutes. So what is evil itself?
Sin.
All right, sin is an evil, right? So sin is evil? Yes, it is. Okay. So sin is going to be, by definition, evil. But what exactly is evil itself? Okay, opposite of good, absence of good. I like the absence part, it's good. What else? Just start shouting out.
Contradicts God's nature.
It contradicts God's nature. Alright, so it's sin, absence of good, contradicts God's nature, is in rebellion against God, right? Shaking, like, I can do it my way. Okay, that's good, that's good. I've got a question for you. This is a philosophical question. Is evil a thing, or is it not a thing?
It's
Not a thing.
Is it something that exists as a thing, or is it something that exists as not a thing? Just think about it. Now here is a set of premises that's going to naturally lead to a conclusion that should answer your question. God created all things. True or false?
True.
Evil is a thing. Therefore God created. It has to be true from the conclusion. So is evil a thing or not a thing? Now this is important. This is important. God created all things. Evil is not a thing. Therefore, God didn't create evil. It has to be. Alright, so we're going to be talking about this just real quick as we go over a definition of evil. So, you might not understand what I'm talking about. You might think this is like crazy. Evil has to, because I see it everywhere. Well, it exists as a privation, a perversion, or the lack of a good thing. I want you guys to remember that. A privation, a perversion, or the lack of a good thing. It's something that is not being used for its intended purpose. So, before we go on, I'm going to give you some examples of evil real quick. So, you have evil acts, like things that you do, such as like murder or lying, that would be an evil act. You have evil people, like Adolf Hitler, he's an evil dude. You know, he should have been this good, but he really was this good, right? All right. So you have evil books, things like pornography or things of that nature, right? There's evil books out there. You have evil events, tornadoes, tsunamis, things like that. They shouldn't be this way. We could acknowledge this, right? You have evil sickness, like cancer or blindness, things of this nature. So what evil is not? Evil is not a substance. I want you guys to remember, just lock this in your head. This is going to be good for you moving forward, even in your theology for the rest of your life. Evil is not a substance, and it's not a dueling force of good. It's not like the Force. You know, use the Force. There's the light side and the dark side. Or no, there is no dark side in that sense. There is no dueling force. There's no yin and yang, right? And so this is something that you got to understand. And a good analogy for it is light and darkness. And this is an analogy. Okay, so take it for what it is. Darkness is defined not as an entity in and of itself, but it's defined as the absence of light, right? And so this is how we want to sort of look at good and evil as well. Evil is defined as the absence, or we can use it in this definition as the absence of goodness, okay? So, in order for something to be evil, there has to be an absence of goodness where it should be. All right? Or in other words, just to go back to the confusing statement from before, a no thing, right? Not a thing. A lack of a thing, okay? So it's a lack or a corruption or a privation or a perversion of a thing. Those are all similar words, but they kind of suit what evil is. So think of it this way. 2x4s, when they were made, say I made a 2x4 with the explicit purpose to hold up a wall in this building. Well, that's the purpose or the telos of the 2x4. That's why I made it. But I can take it and I can pervert the purpose of the 2x4 and smack you in the face with it, can't I? Within natural reality, my freedom included, I can take the purpose of something and change it for an evil purpose. Do you see that? So that would be evil. It's a perversion of the use of the 2x4. The 2x4 was made for this. I used it for this, right? And so that would be evil. Did God create that? No. It was me. I chose to. An evil creature. Things like that, all right? Think of lack of kindness, okay? So God calls you to be kind, and a lack of kindness is going to show up in being mean, right? So we say you're being mean, but what we're really meaning is you're not being kind like you should be, all right? So it's a perversion or privation of, or the lack of kindness that brings about meanness, okay? So it's not a thing, it's the lack of a thing. And now this is a good one to think about. Now maybe you're here and you're in school. Well, before I get into this next one, actually, it's good to think about. Think about it like this. Evil is like a 4.0, okay? That's perfect GPA, okay? Perfect. It's a perfect GPA. You get a B or C or D, right, then all of a sudden your GPA drops. Now it's not perfect anymore. It's not perfectly good, all right? So it's the perversion or the privation or the lack of a thing, right? So that doesn't mean that there's not a 0.1% in your GPA anymore. There's actually a lack of it now. You had it, now you don't, okay? And so this is how we want to think about evil. Also, you know, just a further example, think of a car fresh off the lot. Make it a bright red Corvette. It's perfect in every way. Absolutely stunning Corvette. This is how easy it is for evil to come into something. When you have something like a Corvette perfect off the lot, it can be perfect in every single way, But when I key just a little bit of the side of it, now I've taken what was wholly perfect and made it wholly imperfect just because of one scratch. Do you see how evil works? It's not that that I put something on the Corvette that made it bigger. And no, it's the perversion of a good thing, the privation or the lack of. And when we talk about evil that way, we get out of the blaming God kind of thing. So this is God creates all things. Evil is a thing. Therefore, God created evil. Ooh, this can't be. God is all good. And so this is something we want to avoid, but it's also good for the sake of argument. Okay, so are you guys following along with me? This is pretty interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, good. So the problem of evil, we got to define evil. Why is there such a lack of goodness in the world then? Okay, let's think of it this way. So what is corrupted must first be without corruption. When God created this world, he said it was good. If you read the Genesis account. Now, obviously, when you're talking to an atheist, he's not going to think like this or whatever. But just so you guys understand, it was good. All right? And only that which is good can be corrupted. All right? So that which it has no purity to lose cannot be corrupted. If you don't have purity to lose, you can't be corrupted. Okay? What is corrupted is perverted, and what is perverted ceases to be perfect and good. All right. So we know what evil is now. It's the privation, perversion, or whatever of a thing. All right. So where did evil come from? The answer to this question is the heart of the problem of evil. The answer to this question, where did it come from, is at the heart of the problem of evil. One thing that makes men moral is freedom. It's freedom. We have a real choice. But in making us that way, God has to allow for the possibility of evil. Now, I want to talk to you guys just really briefly about freedom and not freedom, okay? I don't know what your views are on it. And frankly, I don't think for the sake of argument it matters too much. Maybe you don't believe in human freedom, or you do. I personally do. I think that people have free wills, right? But there's some Christians out there that don't believe that they do. The point in arguing for the freedom of man is not to necessarily say that this is the way it absolutely is. You're just going to show a defense against the fact that cow is an inconsistent set. That's all you need to do in one instance. Because if I can give a defense that God allows for evil to exist and him to exist and things of that nature, and it be a consistent set, if I can show there's a contradiction there, and that you actually can have a God existing with all of these other things, all the omnis existing as well, then at that point, how much more, if I can do it, whether I'm right or wrong, but if I can show that it's logically consistent, how much more can the God of the universe have better reasons? So I don't need to give 100 reasons. I don't even necessarily have to give the actual reason. I don't know what the actual reason is for evil existing, but if I can give a logically consistent reason, then the logical problem of evil flies out the window. If I can do it, and I can be logical, and I can make it work as a human being with consistent logic, then how much more can the God of the universe? You don't have to show the act. This is why it's called a defense, and not necessarily what's known as a theodicy or a justification for why God does what he does. So you're just saying, look, this logical set you say is inconsistent. I'm going to show you why it's actually a consistent set using free will. And so this is what's known as the free will defense. If you guys are looking, the guy who made this popular, he's actually, it's kind of funny, it's Alvin Plantinga, right? So he made this popular. Did you know that Alvin Plantinga, at least when he was teaching, when my professor that taught me the problem of evil stuff was in school, he was a Calvinist. But he uses a free will defense. Why? It's probably similar reasons. He doesn't need to give the actual reason for evil to exist. He just needs to give a reason to show that evil can exist with God coexisting and there be no logical inconsistency. That's all he has to do. That's all you have to do as well in order to defeat the logical problem of evil. You have to just give one. So on a truth table, you have to just show it's false one time, right? Just one time, and it becomes invalid. Or you have to show that it can be true as well in their argument. So this is what you're doing. You're giving a defense, okay? And so we're going to argue from free will. I personally do believe in free will. If you guys want to have further conversation about that later with me, we can. But I want to go into the free will defense, okay? So to be truly free, we can't just be able to choose good, but also evil. To be truly free, in a libertarian sense, we can't simply just be able to choose good, but also we have to be able to choose evil as well, okay? God, look, and so let's go on to here. I want you guys to see this. So God creates the fact of freedom, but we perform the acts of freedom. I've got a question for you guys. Now, obviously, God doesn't create evil, but God did create us free, and that's what I would argue. Is freedom a good thing? Yeah, I think it is. I think freedom is a good thing. It allows for true love and things of that nature. It is a very good thing. So God is completely consistent in creating freedom, and then from that, there's the acts of freedom that the free creature has to perform. It's going to be on him. Okay, so here, think about this. So God made evil possible, but men made evil actual. Now this sounds kind of scary. God made it possible. Well, yeah, he did. If God wants the highest good, which is going to be obedience to him, coerced or forced obedience is not going to be true obedience. And so he might be just justified in allowing it to be so that way we can either truly choose for him or against him. All right? So, let me see where I'm at before I get there. Okay, so imperfection came through the abuse of our moral perfections as free creatures. And I want you guys to understand this, that our imperfections came from the moral abuse, or came through the abuse of our moral perfections as free creatures. So God created us good, and we choose to do evil with the freedom, the good freedom that he's given us. All right, so here. So why didn't God make us unable to choose? Now look, I want you guys to try to find some contradictions in here, right? So why didn't God make us unable to choose to do things that cause pain and suffering? So in order to choose to love God, man must be able to choose not to, okay? In order to truly love God, man must be able to choose not to. God does not force love. I do not believe forced love is true love. I don't think in any situation that you can possibly put anyone in, forced love is true love. Okay? In very immoral situations, forced love it's rape, right? Okay, this is not a good thing. And so what I want you guys to think about is the God of the universe going to force us, or force his love on us in a sense that he's going to force us to love him? I don't think he is. I think true love in a relational sense, maybe not in an unconditional, I'm going to love you no matter what sense, but in a relational sense, is going to be reciprocal. There's going to be a reciprocation of that love. So in order to choose to obey God, we must be able to choose not to obey God. This is what freedom logically entails. Otherwise, man is not really free. Man wouldn't be free. Okay? So, couldn't God have anticipated the consequences of giving people free choice? Well, yeah. Yeah, and he did. He did. But he saw the big picture. He saw the big picture. And for all we know, it's so far beyond our ken, or our ability to know whether or not this is the best of all possible worlds that we could live in or not. For all we know, it is. That in this world, that God knew everything. We know he's omniscient. We knew he knew everything. And he saw the big picture, right? He saw the end result and determined that it was worth it. It was worth it. So let's get back to the arguments. I want you guys to look at some of these things. So this is something you might see. You might see like in your school one day. I don't know. And so if God is all good, he would destroy evil. Okay? Are you guys tracking along with me?
Yeah.
Okay. Let me know if you're getting a little bored, because we can always mix it up. I got some videos too, okay? All right, so if God is all good, he would destroy evil, right?
Mm-hmm. That's wrong.
If God is all powerful, he could destroy evil, okay? But evil is not destroyed, hence, there is no such God. All right. I want to let you guys interact just a little bit with this argument from what we've already gone over, just a little bit. What do you think? How would you... Now, when you're interacting with the argument, here is a conclusion, and it seems to be logically consistent with these ones, but what premise here would you attack, or what would you add? Okay, explain why.
Because he wouldn't destroy evil because that would destroy our freedom, and hence it wouldn't give us the ability to love him back. And
Very
that's the goal.
interesting. Okay, so that means, man, you are tracking along. This is good. Yeah. And so, if God is all powerful, he could destroy evil. Well, yeah, I mean, this would hold true even if you had the first premise as explained by you. It wouldn't make it, yeah, he could do it, but would he do it? No, I don't think so. All right, so you find out that if you add another premise in, it's very easy to refute and whatnot. Okay. So why can't evil be stopped is the question. So why can't evil be stopped? Where am I here? Okay. Evil cannot be destroyed without destroying freedom. So you are on the right track. This is good. Okay. Freedom was given to us so that we could love. And I want you to think about this. Freedom given so we can love. Okay? Alright, so freedom was given so we could love. Love is the greatest good for all creatures, but love is impossible without freedom. So love is impossible without freedom. So if freedom were destroyed, which is the only way to end evil, that would be evil in and of itself, because it would deprive free creatures of their greatest good. Hence, to destroy evil would actually be evil. To not allow for it would actually be evil. It would also be erroneous. You have free will, but no, you don't. Like, you don't really get to choose. Just imagine if the tree was in the Garden of Eden, and every time Adam and Eve went to go pick from the tree of life, because God wanted to keep everything perfect, or the tree of knowledge of good and evil, he just plucked the tree up so they couldn't do it. Well, there's something wrong there, isn't there? If there's genuine choice, then there actually needs to be an ability to choose for or against that's not just contrived. Okay? So if evil is to be overcome, we need to talk about it being defeated and not destroyed. Alright? So evil needs to be defeated, not destroyed. Problem of evil is really a problem of justice. Alright, so the problem of evil is really a problem of justice. Just because evil is not yet destroyed doesn't mean it will never be defeated. Okay? Or it's not yet defeated, I'm sorry. It's not yet defeated doesn't mean that it will never be defeated. Okay? Some of you guys might have friends that think, why did God allow? You guys, if this was it, evil, if there was no God past this, evil would be a big problem. But we still have what's beyond here for God to judge and take care of and to make right things that were wrong. There are things beyond what's in our present state. So it's arrogant to say that evil will never be defeated. That would be completely arrogant. To say God hasn't defeated evil, therefore he will never defeat evil, is not right. Okay? So, but does the person making this argument know the future? No, we don't. No one who would argue this actually knows whether or not God is going to make right the wrongs that have been committed, or to judge them justly, or repay them for the good that they've done. This is the requirement of justice. It's not when the punishment happens or when the reward happens. It's that the punishment happens and that the reward happens. And there's a difference. Or else our justice system of keeping people on death row for like 20 years or 40, that's unjust. But it's not, because eventually they're going to get their due penalty, their just deserts. Okay? It's not when, it's that. So just because God is slow in judging, that actually shows benevolence, not malevolence. Slow judgment is a good thing on the part of a judge. Okay? And this is something I want you guys to think about. If we state the argument to allow for God's future, to allow for God, so the argument we went over before, if we state the argument to allow for God's future defeat of evil, then it turns the argument that, to actually vindicate God. Okay, it actually shows that God has good reason for allowing evil. So let's look at the argument again. So if God is all good, he would destroy evil. All right. If God is all powerful, he could destroy evil, but evil is not destroyed, hence there is no such God. So let's change destroyed to defeat, because, all right, and let's go on to add a premise to the argument. If God is all good, he will defeat evil. If God is all powerful, he can defeat evil. Evil is not yet defeated, therefore God can and will one day defeat evil. And that's not a problem, is it? Okay? And so this is often what you're going to see with this set. So you can with the what's proclaimed as an inconsistent set, because it's implicit and not explicit, if you add a premise into it that shows it to be logically consistent, then you're fine. You've already defeated the problem of evil. So say you add free will. God wants free creatures into the OOO count, right? And those free creatures, God's not going to violate their freedom, therefore God allows for evil. Then all of a sudden, in that inconsistent set, you've allowed for a consistency, for God to be good and for evil to exist. Do you guys understand? Are you guys seeing the reasoning? How many of you guys have questions so far? Or are you tracking with me? Okay, that's good. All right. So evil will be defeated. This is something that's going to happen. I want you guys to look at Romans 8:28. This is something that we all get to hope in for those of us who are found in the love of God. It says, and we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose. Okay? God works for the good. Well, man, I had this, my child died, or this horrible thing happened to my family, or this thing happened to me, or my kids, or whatever. And it just seems so unfair. Okay? God, if you are in Christ, God is working for the good of those who love him. You don't have to worry. And to say that there's absolutely no purpose for something is completely beyond your ability to know. You don't know. There's some there's a word that the atheists like to use. It's called gratuitous evil. It means meaningless evil. Evil in which God cannot justify his allowing of that evil, right? So that's where you hear that word gratuitous, right? So gratuitous evil is evil that which God cannot justify allowing to exist, okay? But I don't think that's the case. I think that's so far beyond our epistemic access, our ability to understand. Epistemology is the study of knowledge. It's so far beyond our ability to understand that we cannot, in any good reason, say that God doesn't have a reason for this. It's beyond our ability to know, okay? And so we can have faith that, and we can trust, even logically, that evil can exist and so can God. Philippians 1:6 even talks about, maybe you're here and you're discouraged and you've had something bad happen in your life, that he who began a good work in you will be faithful to complete it. A good work doesn't necessarily mean no pain or no suffering, and this is understood by the Christian faith. Suffering is not ideal, but suffering also provides us with virtues that we wouldn't have had otherwise. Suffering itself keeps us from evils equally bad or worse sometimes as well, right? So think about me going to the dentist and getting a tooth pulled. If I don't get that tooth taken care of, it might hurt, there might be suffering at the time, but it's preventing me from an evil that's equally bad or worse in the future, isn't it?
Yeah.
Or maybe I need to get my arm set because my arm broke or whatever, and I don't want them to set my arm because that's going to hurt a lot, right? But there are certain evils that are necessary in that sense that are going to prevent further evils from happening. Those are more natural things, but that's also the case even with people who are doing moral evil as well. Sometimes God is able to turn a bad situation for the good of a nation or a people or a person. And this is something that's worth noting. Look at the story of Joseph and his brothers in the scriptures in Genesis. You guys know what I'm talking about? His brothers sold him into slavery. But ultimately, even though he was a slave to Potiphar, then in jail for a long time, eventually he goes into second command in all the nations, and he's able to say to his brothers face to face, look, you meant what you did for evil, but God meant it for good. You did the acts, but God was in control. And he knew what was going on. And he was able to turn it for good. So ultimately, sometimes God allows for suffering in our life to allow for some sort of greater good to happen in the future, or to prevent an evil that is equally bad or worse. And that's not a bad thing. Okay, so at the end so sometimes he uses these things to help us learn from our mistakes, to help us learn in situations. Without certain evils, we wouldn't be able to learn certain virtues, such as long-suffering, right? Patience sometimes, right? There are certain things that evil even allows us to learn virtuously, okay? So it's used for training. It's used for mid-course correction sometimes as well. Sometimes bad things happen, and we notice, like, we're hitting walls, and the walls hurt because we're hitting them at full speed. Well, it hurts. That pain might be a good thing to maybe go away from the wall area into the area where there isn't a wall, right? And so sometimes mid-course correction, there's pain. Put my hand on the stove. Ow, that hurt. Pain, ouch, ouch. Okay, don't do that. So sometimes, or I committed adultery. Didn't commit adultery, don't worry. But like, so, we've all committed adultery in our heart, guys. Okay, all right.
There you go.
Okay. All right, but go ahead. Oh man, shouldn't have done that. Feel terrible. Well, you're going to feel bad because it is bad. Okay. All right. So then there's positive from negatives. Life of Joseph, the cross as well. The pinnacle of God's strength was the weakness of Christ. Right. That's crazy. All right. So and then also for getting your attention. You know, sometimes God, He uses some bad situation to just scream at us, be like, look, you are really doing what's not good. And so what is the end of the story? In the end, God is going to wipe every tear from our eyes. There's a verse in Romans 21, 1 through 4. It says, "Now I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth had passed away. Also there is no more sea. Then I, John, saw the holy city, New Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride, adorned for her husband. And I heard a loud voice from heaven saying, Behold, the tabernacle of God is with men, and He will dwell with them, and they shall be His people. God Himself will be with them and be their God. And God will wipe away every tear from their eyes. There shall be no more death, nor sorrow, nor crying. There shall be no more pain, for the former things have passed away." Revelation 21, 1 through 4. Guys, in the end, evil will be defeated. But God is not going to take away our highest form of worship. And this is the whole point of the gospel. Is God knows that there's always going to be a possibility for us to sin, right? There's going to be that possibility. But what He's doing is He's not transforming the laws of nature around us to take away our freedom. He's transforming our hearts, our want-tos. You know, it's one thing to be forced and subjugated and made to do something good, but it's another thing to have the gospel of Jesus come into your life and transform your heart so that you want to do what is good. And this is what we see in the New Testament. In Titus, it talks about how Jesus is setting apart from Himself a people who are eager to do what is good. And I love that verse because it talks about eagerness. It's not forced to do what is good, have to do what is good, you know, under the law, and they have to, under the nation's law that they're in, they have to do what's good because it's the law. No, the law is on their heart. They're eager to do what is good. And I believe in heaven, we're going to be so transformed by the love of God and being in His presence that everyone is going to continually be eager to do what is good. There's going to be a transformed heart that's not bogged down by these bodies of sin and flesh. We're going to be sealed in that want to. Here we have that free decision. We make it here, and God seals us in it for eternity. The highest form of worship to God is obedience. You can't have obedience without the possibility of disobedience. And disobedience has a lot of consequences. So I want to show you guys something. We're going to go over, what time is it? Anybody? Wowzers, I didn't even realize. Guys, I might have to pick up next week. I had no idea how late it was getting. So
Keep the train
I got yeah, I mean, we can go over this real quick. I mean, guys, I have so much more than what we went over tonight on the problem of evil. I have a ton on it. We barely scratched the surface, I feel like. But let's watch this. This is a good summary. Now, this is gonna be a place where we're gonna get good argumentation to be able to take away and things of that nature. Because we've been dealing with the logical problem tonight. Maybe next week we'll go over. I'll just maybe make a part 2 of this series where we'll go over we'll go over the end of the problem of evil, and then we'll talk about the moral argument for God's existence next week. I think that might be good. Make it a 2-part thing. I was going to go into the historicity next week, but we can push that back a week. Okay. But this is good. Okay, let's watch this video and we'll end here.
We are all well aware of the suffering and evil in the world. Horrific suffering. Unspeakable evil. How then can anyone believe in the existence of an all-loving, all-powerful God? And if God does exist, why would anyone want to worship Him? why call him God? In other words, it's logically impossible for God and suffering to both exist. But we know full well that suffering exists. Therefore, God does not. Is this a good argument? Let's look at it more closely. Are these two statements logically inconsistent? No. Here is an example of two logically inconsistent statements. David can't be both married and a bachelor. But there is no explicit contradiction between these two statements. So there must be hidden assumptions behind this argument that would bring out the alleged contradiction. Here they are. If God is all-powerful, he can create any world he wants. And if God is all-loving, he prefers a world without suffering. So, if an all-powerful, all-loving God exists, it follows that suffering does not exist. Since suffering obviously does exist, the atheist concludes that God must not exist. But are the atheist's two hidden assumptions necessarily true? Consider the first assumption. Can God create any world he wants? What if he wants a world populated by people who have free will? It's logically impossible for God to force someone to freely choose to do good. Forcing free choices is like making a square circle. It's not logically possible. It's not that God lacks the power to perform the task. It's that the supposed task itself is just nonsense. So, it may not be feasible to create a world populated by people who always freely choose to do what is morally good. So the first assumption is not necessarily true. Therefore, the argument fails. And what about the second assumption? Is it necessarily true that God would prefer a world without suffering? How could we possibly know this? We all know of cases where we permit suffering in order to bring about a greater good. If it's even possible that God allows suffering in order to achieve a greater good, then we cannot say this assumption is necessarily true. For the logical problem of suffering to succeed, the atheist would have to show that it's logically impossible that free will exists, and that it's logically impossible that God has good reasons for permitting suffering. This burden of proof is too heavy to bear.
Oh my gosh, what just happened?
We are all well aware, true. For the logical problem that free will exists, and that it's logically impossible that God has good
Notice
reasons
it says
for
logically
suffering.
impossible.
This burden of proof is too heavy to bear. It's quite possible that God and suffering both exist. This is why philosophers, even atheist philosophers, have given up on the logical problem of evil.
We can concede that the problem of evil does not, after all, show that the central doctrines of theism are logically inconsistent with one another. Some philosophers have contended that the existence of evil is logically inconsistent with the existence of a theistic God. No one, I think, has succeeded in establishing such an extravagant claim. It's now acknowledged on almost all sides that the logical argument is bankrupt.
But this is hardly the end of the discussion. We still need to explore the probability version of the problem of evil. Atheist philosophers, and that it's logically impossible that God has good reason.
All right, so let's stop here for a second, and we'll close. But I want you guys to notice something. We're talking about logical possibility. We're not talking about actual reality right now. We're giving a defense. All we have to do when somebody says that my set is logical is to show within logical possibility why it fails, okay? And so when we're talking about logically possible, we're not concerned necessarily with the way things actually are right now. We're just showing that there can be reasons that are logically consistent that allow for God's existence and suffering. And if you're able to do that, you're able to defeat, in a defense, the logical problem of evil. And then we move past the logical problem. Okay, God could exist and evil can exist in the world. but God probably doesn't exist because of the way things are evil in this world. Now we're going into probabilities. He probably doesn't. Okay, you guys see what I'm saying? So the logical problem of evil is sort of it is a heavy burden to bear by the atheist. So never let someone corner you with a logical problem. Okay. In fact, use Craig's arguments. Go find this video. It's good. Write it down. Memorize these things. A good book, if you guys want to go over it, is called On Guard. I'm actually going through it right now. It's by Dr. Craig himself. And this is something that's worth doing. And now, what we've done tonight is we've showed you why we've gone over definitions of evil. We've talked about inconsistent sets versus consistent sets, implicit versus explicit contradictions. These are all terms that you should know. And then from there, we've talked about why it is logically consistent. We've talked about hidden premises in the problem of evil that have to be assumed. But if you assume other premises, other hidden premises, it actually doesn't become a problem. We've talked about that. And so I want you guys to walk away here encouraged, knowing that if we're able to come up with a logical defense for the problem of evil, then how much more is the God of the universe able and justified to permit evil in the world? Right? Do you guys see the line of thought there? Now, I think this argument is solid. I would personally adhere to it. I think we really do have free will and things of that nature. And like I said, if you want to talk to me later about that, that's fine. Maybe not tonight, another night. But let's close in prayer. And food for thought. Next week we'll talk about then. Next week we are going to talk about the moral argument and logic, the probability argument for the problem of evil. Okay, so we'll probably start with the probability, then we'll go into the moral argument. You sort of heard a shorthand version of it when Dr. Craig was talking on the stage, a few minutes ago as well. And that's what we'll go, and then from there we'll go to the resurrection. And why are we going to the resurrection? Because now we've established God exists. The main objection of an atheist, a lot of them are erroneous or invalid, and we're able to show that within the realm of probability, God probably still exists within the weight of evidence of every argument that we've gone over so far. We'll see that by next week, and then we'll say, okay, now which God? We're going to argue for the God of Christianity. How are we going to do that? By establishing that there's historicity, the historical evidence for Jesus Christ and his resurrection. Okay? So let's pray, guys. Lord, thank you for the time that we've been able to come here today and tonight. Forgive us of our sins and help us to walk humbly in you and understand who you are. Lord, give us a mind that is ready to worship you and hearts that are on fire for you, Jesus. Lord, we love you so much. Thank you for everything you've done. I praise in Jesus' name. Amen.